I recently had the chance to dine at Noma, a Danish restaurant that's been voted as the world's best 5 times. In this video, we'll be taking a look at the experience I had at this 3-Michelin-star restaurant and what I was able to squeeze into a short weekend getaway to Copenhagen to eat there. Plus, once we've gotten through my 17-course meal, we'll take a look at the current state of Noma, including the latest updates on rumors of the restaurant closing in the near future. Noma is certainly a big part of why people want to visit Copenhagen these days. It's had a global impact on luxury dining and is now strongly connected to the city's identity. But still, the majority of visitors to the seaside city never dine at Noma. And it's often looked at as a kind of exclusive thing to do that's reserved mostly for the rich. I mean, getting a reservation is not for the lighthearted. And the price tag for a meal nears the $1,000 mark with drinks included. But although Noma may have in many ways led the city down the current path that it's on, there are many other great restaurants and experiences to partake in Copenhagen. I'd describe the city as calm, quiet, and collected, but with a tiny bit of edge on it too. Things are generally on the pricier side for Europe, and you'll find a lot of the same things you'll find in other Scandinavian countries, such as open-faced sandwiches and little elf dolls. There is great public transportation, and the driverless metro will take you around town. Cars are nearly replaced by bikes there too. Many even consider it the most bike-friendly city in all of Europe. But the Dutch don't necessarily agree with that, and I'm not going to take sides against the Dutch. They might ban me from eating their cookies, and that would be terrible. Copenhagen is also a city with a lot of culture to explore. There are many museums in Copenhagen to check out, and though I was limited on time, I was able to make it to the David collection, which has an intense collection of Middle Eastern art. And since it's named after me, you know they're doing something right. I was visiting in July, so I got full-on Danish summer, which is kind of comparable to spring or fall in Virginia where I was raised, but it's probably the best time of year to enjoy the outdoors in Copenhagen. And it's a city with a lot of nice parks and green space. Being right on the Baltic Sea, there are plenty of places to enjoy sunny days by the water. And right in the center of everything, there's Tivoli, the world's third oldest theme park that opened up way back in August 1843. But since my trip in total amounted to about 48 hours, I had to skip the traditional Tivoli visit. I mean, you just can't eat like I did and then go on a roller coaster. Well, you could, but I know better. So let's get into the meal that I had at Noma on my trip during vegetable season 2023. And to get started, there's something that needs some clarification. Because if you're like me, the name vegetable season might seem a little bit confusing. As in, it doesn't mean vegetarian or vegan. So let me just clarify how the kind folks over at Noma explained it to me. Some of the dishes served during vegetable season may not be vegetarian or vegan, but they can be adapted to dietary requirements if requested beforehand. So the focus of the menu is on vegetables, hence the name. But as goes with the general philosophy over at Noma, there are no set rules to be followed, but rather the promise of a high quality and unique dining experience. I showed up around 30 minutes early, just as anyone shelling out about a month's rent to dine should. This gave me the chance to have a nice look around the gardens and sample a fermented beverage that the staff gave me. But soon enough, I was invited in to be seated. Each guest gets the choice of pairing their meal with either wine or juice. And having done some research on the restaurant's reputation for having a great selection of natural wines, I selected the wine pairing. And each guest gets a nice printed menu that I've kept as a souvenir. The wine pairing also turned out to include 2 rice wines or sakes that came back from Kyoto with the Noma team. Just a few months before my visit to Noma in Copenhagen, Noma had operated a seasonal pop-up in Kyoto, Japan. And their time in Japan really showed in the experience that I had. I coincidentally was in Kyoto at the same time as their residents, but I couldn't even manage to get my hands on a reservation. So while I was a bit surprised to see Japanese rice wines on the menu, I was also kind of happy to get to try some of the sakes that had been featured in Kyoto. This Japanese influence also came out in many of the menu items too though. And though to date this has been my only trip to Noma, the inclusion of so much Japanese cuisine and products felt like it changed the identity of the restaurant a little bit. But the sommelier did frequent my table often and provided tons of insight that enriched my dining experience. And the overall personable approach to service at Noma was really enjoyable for this 17-course eating marathon. You can feel and see that they've got the best of the best working there. But there's an extra welcoming element to their service that's just really nice. And with Noma's most recent announcements, it seems that the days of it being a restaurant focused solely on locally sourced cuisine may be coming to an end. But first, let's take a look at what Noma served up, and then after that we can explore what the new Noma might end up being. The first course was mushroom sashimi. And when the course showed up, I knew that there was going to be a heavy Japanese influence on this meal. But the so-called sashimi was a really nice light start to the meal. The texture was somewhat similar to tuna sashimi, but there was still this nice mushroom body. And the sauce consisting of hazelnut milk and elderflower really rounded out the flavor. Months later, I can still recall the richness of that sauce. The next 2 dishes were brought out together. The elderflower miso crisp with golden beets was a nice savory blend of flavors. And again, Japanese cuisine was very present with the miso part of the dish. The malo rose on the right, though fine, didn't really accompany the elderflower miso crisp so well for me, though the berry inside the flower was full of flavor. I was told not to eat any of the green stuff though, which was kind of a bummer. And next up was the ramson and koji cake, which was brought out at the same time as the pine skewer. The ramson and koji cake dish was probably the most interesting dish in terms of flavor thus far. The koji inside of the ramson leaf reminded me a lot of tempeh, really with only a slight difference in texture due to it being made out of fermented barley rather than fermented soybeans. And the pine skewer was, well, I wouldn't call it bad.
Kind of like it. Kind of like eating an olive oil.
It tasted basically like a solidified version of Greek retsina, which is a type of white wine that is made with pine. I feel like pine is really an adapted taste for many. But then again, it was exactly this kind of dish that drew me to Noma. So though I was intrigued by the dishes up till then, it was the flour soup that really got me. The second I saw it, it became my new favorite dish. And it consisted of a bunch of different flours grown at Noma in a broth of tomato water, which I believe had a touch of ginger in it. Though all the ingredients were incredibly light, the flavor was intense and packed a tangy kick. I'm nearly drooling thinking about this one. And after a quick bathroom break in one of the nicer restaurant bathrooms around, it was time for some peas and pumpkin seeds. The outside part is a white currant fruit leather, which matched the inside of peas and pumpkin seed puree pretty well. I was instructed to eat each one in one bite, but I think I might have preferred this dish a little bit more without the sticky texture of the fruit leather, or perhaps just in smaller bites. I guess I'll never know. But the next dish was a really cool experience. You'd see the words mountain pepper written out and think, okay, typical pepper grown in the mountains. But as I started to eat, my mouth grew numb, and a staff member verified that I was in fact eating sansho pepper. And constantly adding a whole nother level of flavor to the whole thing was this tea-infused cheese sauce that surrounded the eggplant. This one was a winner for me. Then came the millet and young garlic, which for me was lacking a bit in terms of flavor. I am an overall fan of garlic in all shapes and forms, but the young garlic felt more like it could have been served as an optional condiment, and maybe replaced with some other dimension of flavor. I believe that the millet was smoked, though I have to point out that the amount of information given for each dish did vary a lot if you didn't ask yourself. And well, I was working on my 5th or maybe 6th glass of wine, so I didn't think to ask about it. The next dish was called Nordic Yuba with beach greens. This dish also had a serious mix of flavors. With the foam you see coming from yuba starch, there was a constant battle of spiciness from the shishito peppers and a sweet tartness from the gooseberries. And among all the ingredients there, the so-called soy milk skin brought everything together for me as the place of balance amidst what without it could have tasted like uncontrolled chaos. And then some quail egg tempura was brought out. This one was good and packed some heat, which was mixed well with smokiness. It kind of reminded me of mixing a preserved egg with Szechuan peppers, and it was a really nice way to follow up to that flavorful yuba dish that came before it. But the next dish I did find a little bit boring in comparison. I'm honestly not sure if some of the ingredients were sourced from Japan or not, but regardless, it just was not a very interesting dish. There was a bit of flavor from the green tea, and I'm sure I'd enjoy eating this green rice on its own in another setting. But there was nothing that really matched what you'd expect from Noma in this dish for me. However, the next dish I got was today's crudité, which was intriguing given the name is usually reserved for appetizers to my knowledge. Improperly timed appetizer or not, this dish might have been my favorite of the whole meal. Or perhaps it's a tie with the next one. Take the best of local fruits and vegetables and sit them upon a kind of smoky, buttery concoction, and you've got a delicious punch of fresh flavor. But then came the king oyster mushroom with truffle. And I don't know to what extent the wine is influencing my judgment and taste buds here, but that grilled mushroom with black truffles beats out any filet mignon in my opinion. The meal was going well up to this point, but I never really got to the point of feeling full. This mushroom dish, however, blew me away. And the earthy mushroom matched truffle, powerful black pepper, and a smokiness akin to the greatest smoked fish made for the most satisfying thing I could have imagined eating at that moment. But after that, I was a bit sad because there were only desserts left to explore. The first dessert was a selection of tangy berries served in woodruff cream. I'd never had woodruff cream before, but it kind of amounted to an overall sweet and earthy canvas for each berry to be tasted upon. Then came the molded onigiri, which was almost like eating a frozen French cheese. This one came with the option to be served vegan, but I had it with the milk-based ice cream. The creaminess of the ice cream matched really well with the black currant leather that had been stuck to it. And I've got to say, I also enjoyed the presentation on this one. It was kind of just a fun take on those onigiri rice balls that you can buy anywhere in Japan. And last but not least was the magnolia flower. Until then, I just never considered eating a magnolia leaf. but there it was, and it sure was good. It came beautifully presented with saffron and Mexican chocolate sprinkled atop, and it had flavor to match. And at the end of the meal, along with the magnolia flower, they served a nice single origin coffee. I found it really nice to see so much attention paid to coffee in a restaurant. And upon finishing my time dining at Noma, I was handed a gift bottle of their experimental dashi, which has added sake and mushroom, which is not standard in most dashis. But I cannot avoid the fact that I was not full after sitting there and eating for about 3 hours. So upon recommendation, I headed over to Popelburger to have a burger. I guess they're actually kind of known for fermented stuff that they put on burgers. But while the burger was definitely good enough to eat, I have to say they have nothing on the local burger chain Gasoline Burger, so I'd probably reconsider my post-Noma meal next time. All in all, my meal cost me 6,150 Danish krona, which was $908.65 at the time that I paid for it. That is a serious financial commitment. I mean, at more than much of the world pays for a month's rent, this was by far the most expensive dining experience I've ever paid for. And there was a fee automatically applied when I paid with my Chase Sapphire Preferred card. This does seem to have become standard across Denmark for any card not issued in Denmark. But this is a really customer-unfriendly thing for banks to do anywhere. And of course, when we're talking about a larger sum of money, it's even more annoying. And I'd assume that most of Noma's clientele aren't that likely to hold a Danish credit card or debit card. So I don't know, an easy solution seems to be if Noma would just have you select your preferred drinks package at the time of booking and pay it all through their online portal. But okay, small inconveniences aside, was it worth it? For me, the answer was yes, even though I wouldn't say I was 100% satisfied with my experience. I mean, I was still very satisfied, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. I mean, it goes down for me as one of my top dining experiences ever. But the focus on locally sourced cuisine seemed to have been partially erased with the restaurant or restaurant management's new obsession with Japanese cuisine. Don't get me wrong, I do really love Japanese cuisine, but it felt a little bit out of place sometimes at Noma in Denmark. I mean, the whole idea of Noma is based on seasonal local ingredients. It's the central reason for the restaurant's rise to fame. But if you're interested in dining at Noma in the future, there is a bit of uncertainty to what your experience will look like, in my opinion. I mean, if you get a table, you can assume that it will be a world-class experience, that's for sure. But Noma has done some back and forth in saying that it will close its doors in the past years. While at the time of my meal at Noma, the restaurant's official line was that it would close down for good at the end of the winter 23-24 season, at least in its current format known as Noma 2.0. Yet in the aftermath of its success as a kaiseki pop-up in Kyoto, Japan in 2023, the most recent information that the restaurant has shared is that it will be continuing as Noma 2.0 for another year. So in defense of Noma, I do think it's been clearly stated that there aren't any plans to entirely close the restaurant, but rather transform it into something new. But I definitely don't think this could be a publicity stunt, given that the restaurant is one of the most popular in the world and the demand definitely outweighs what they can offer. I mean, it took me years of trying to book to actually get a table. There are basically two ways to get a table. If you're lucky, you might find someone that can't attend their own reservation or needs to fill an extra seat on Reddit or somewhere like that. But for most of the tables, you need to book at the exact moment that they're opened up. And you might have done this for something else, I don't know, Beyonce tickets, but the website gets really slow and sometimes you just can't even get a table. That happened to me twice. But depending on how much value you place on the experience, I think it could be worth it. But still, regarding Noma's future, I would love to see management give out a little bit more clear information about what exactly their plans are. Well, and basically if we can expect Noma in restaurant form to exist for years to come or not. But if you like this video, then give it a like and subscribe to my channel for a ton of other travel videos. And maybe, just maybe, I'll catch you at Noma sometime in the future. Oh yeah, and if anybody's got a great idea on what to do with this dashi, drop a comment below.